Okay, everyone, it's 5 o'clock, so I'd like to welcome you to our April Ordinary Council meeting, which we're conducting remotely again in the interests of social distancing to limit the spread of COVID-19. So firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge that our town was founded on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people and to pay our respect to their elders past and present. I have a number of announcements this evening, so just bear with me because some of it will be a bit of a monologue. So first of all, you may have noticed that there's a bit of a change in the order of business tonight, this being because it's the first meeting where we've had our new council meeting procedures local law 2020 active. I'd just like to also remind councillors that while we're having the remote meetings to turn your video and your microphone off until such time as you wish to indicate an intention to speak, in which case could you please turn your video on first, and then when I have seen you, I'll call you by name, and then at that time it'd be great if you could turn your microphone on, and otherwise keeping them off at all times. There are a couple of councillors that still have not sent me through their confirmation that they're in a secure location suitable for discussion of any confidential items. So if that's you, if you could please send me an email, that would be fantastic. Now, the main thing I wanted to give an update on is our COVID-19 response. So there's quite a few things that the town has been doing. So I'll go through them now. And as I said, it is a fairly lengthy list, so please just bear with me for a few minutes. So most of you would be aware that we've had a fantastic response from our community over the last 6 weeks since the state of emergency has been declared, and that has resulted in people taking action to limit their contact with other people by staying home whenever possible. And as a result, we've had several days in the last week where we've had 0 new cases reported in Western Australia, which is fantastic. So we're really fortunate that we live in a strong, resilient community and that together we are working to support one another and to rebuild our routines and our families, our businesses, and also our social networks. So as a council, we want to support our community to not only during this phase, the crisis phase of the pandemic, but also for a strong recovery. As I mentioned, we've introduced a range of measures to address hardship cases and health concerns in our community for our residents, our businesses, for our community, but also for the staff who work on behalf of our community in the town. So just a summary of some of the things that have been implemented. As you may be aware, we had the special council meeting on the 24th of March. And at that time, council requested our CEO to prepare a budget based upon a 0% rate revenue increase and no increase in fees and charges for the next financial year. Excuse me for a second. And we also asked the CEO for the budget to include any costings or any financial impacts to house owners associated with the potential Western Power undergrounding project to be deferred so that they wouldn't impact people in the coming financial year. We have started discussion around our budget for the coming year and the parameters that will form that budget, recognising that the environment we're in at the moment is highly volatile. So the discussions include or have included the opportunity to bring forward capital works, leveraging from our reserves and the opportunity for borrowing in order to seed local economic and community development projects. And tonight, council will further consider a proposal in regards to some of the financial implications. In terms of our local businesses, we're currently reviewing our procurement policies and our practices to put greater weighting on local suppliers that operate within our town or that employ local residents in order to help create jobs for locals and help our local economy. Where we will further promote local businesses in a new campaign to shop, eat and drink local, and a business directory is being developed and will be promoted on our town's website and Thrive magazine. And this is particularly for businesses that are making changes to accommodate the restrictions that are in place because of COVID-19. We're also in the process of developing a hardship policy, and this will be considered by council at the May meeting. And this is in recognition of the significant impacts that the pandemic is having on households, businesses and groups that lease the town's assets. Our staff are also exploring opportunities to leverage Lottery West grants to address associated social issues. And hopefully people are aware that we've launched our Neighbour Assist program, which is our community outreach, including the hotline for vulnerable people to access information, referrals and other services. Our volunteer centre's been doing some fabulous work, and you may have seen some coverage in the media recently, particularly about the partnership with Cyril Jackson and Second Bite, where volunteers are preparing healthy meals and delivering isolated family, which is an initiative that our town. As you can see this evening, we've implemented online council meetings to try and help to limit any spread of the virus. We've also mailed out to all of the households in our town information about the virus and how they can stay safe, but also about the services that the town is offering to support people. We have diverted funding from sponsorship and council events and also commemorative services such as Anzac Day, which would have been held this weekend. And these funds are instead going to be used to fund community outreach services. Last week, we opened our enrolments for the Term 2 Relax program online and providing them free to our community. Our library also has a range of services online, including storytelling and the delivery of books to people at home. The bookings for all of our facilities and classes have been suspended and a full refund provided for cancelled bookings. And until our hardship policy is established, we're adopting a more lenient approach with the non-payment of rates, fees and charges. Even though there was some easing of restrictions just yesterday to allow gatherings of up to 10 people while still maintaining social distancing, our town's playgrounds, skate parks, exercise equipment, water fountains will continue to be closed to the public until further restrictions are relaxed. So as I mentioned, we've started to prepare our budget for the coming year. There's a lot of uncertainty and it's challenging for our staff and for council to forecast how the current pandemic is going to impact into the future. So we're taking a different approach to the budget this year. Tonight, council will consider some of the parameters and assumptions on which to base next year's budget. This is necessary given the ambiguity of the current environment, but rather than delaying the budget for a number of months in the hope that things will change and settle, council will instead plan to have not just one budget review in the next financial year, but we'll have at least two, with the intention being to have one in November and then another in around March next year. So this will allow us to revise any of the assumptions that we've made and revisit them. As I mentioned, as part of the budget setting process, council is going to consider the hardship our community is currently facing and any constraints on the town's income and cash flow. And as a result, the need that we have to adapt any services to support our community, in addition to considering the necessary stimulus to facilitate a recovery following the pandemic. So this is quite an unusual budget cycle, and this will be discussed further in tonight's meeting, but I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our staff who have been working hard behind the scenes to respond quickly for our community and also to prepare a budget for the next financial year that will reflect Council's desire to support our community during this time and to provide for our community while they are having financial difficulties. One more thing I'd like to just mention before we move on. Last weekend was Anzac Day, and although we could not hold our ordinary service due to the restrictions on group gatherings, it was really encouraging to see some fantastic community efforts to recognise Anzac Day. One that I found particularly touching was for Cliff Ferguson, a 96-year-old veteran who lives in the town, where the family organised a walk or cycle past to pay tribute to Cliff. I was fortunate to go and visit and to meet Cliff and his family, but it's been really encouraging and inspiring to see people come together to support one another and to do things differently. And I think probably even though Anzac Day was quite different this year, for some individuals such as Cliff, it was really a unique and special experience despite the inability for us to come together. So thank you to everybody who made an effort to acknowledge this day over the weekend. So that's all for that. So item 3 is attendances, apologies, application. Agenda indicates that Councillor Gangel is an apology, but he's actually able to participate this evening. So we may just quickly go through each of the councillors to confirm that everybody is able to hear and is in attendance. So Councillor Hamilton, are you able to hear and present?
Thank you, I'm here. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gangel?
Correct, able to hear and in attendance.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Hello, Your Worship. Yes, I'm in attendance and in a secure location for the purposes of the regulations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Quinton?
Yes, thank you. I'm also here.
Thank you. Councillor McWilliam?
Yes, present and correct. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Barty?
In attendance, thank you.
Thank you. I believe all of the officers are in attendance. I confirmed with our CEO before the meeting. Are there any applications for leave from councillors? Okay, we'll move on then to item 4, which is declarations of interest. I have a proximity interest in item 12.4, which is the draft amended design guidelines. This is the property where I reside. I've already submitted a form to the CEO in advance of the meeting. Are there any other declarations of interest from councillors? Okay, excellent, thank you. Item 5, presentations or deputations. We haven't received any, although at the briefing session we did receive one deputation on item 12.5, which was in relation to the tree preservation order from the property owners in opposition to the officer recommendation. Item 6, statements by members of the public on the agenda items. Did receive a late statement from Ms. Noni Jacobson. So her statements relate to item 12.5, which is the tree preservation order. Ms. Jacobson says, I would like to comment that I support the officer's recommendation on item 12.5. Retaining trees on development sites is difficult and we must do what we can to look after what's left of our town's mature tree assets. Having shade trees on the western side of a property is ideal as they provide shade from afternoon summer sun when it is most wanted, and rather than being a design constraint, they are a bonus to any future landscaping. Also in regards to item 16, which is the confidential FOGO item, Ms Jacobson says we're looking forward to the rollout of FOGO bins and hope it remains on track. That was all. Mrs Mabs, I don't believe there are any further statements received.
No, that's correct, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So item 7, which is questions from members of the public, received a number of questions from Ms Jane Bremer. These questions are all in relation to agenda item 12.14, which is the Bassendean Local Emergency Management Committee meeting, which was held on the 1st of April. And the questions are specifically around the Cleanaway fire that happened earlier in the year and the impact on the town of Bassendean and our river. So I'll just try and summarise the questions. There's quite a number here. They'll all appear in the agenda, and then I will ask Mr Gibson to respond to them, please. So first of all, Ms Bremer asks, could council please confirm whether a letter has been sent to the DEWA as identified in point 3 of the agenda item? And if yes, can this please be tabled? Secondly, she asks, will the town further write to DEWA to confirm if PFAS or other firefighting foams were used in the Cleanaway fire? And if yes, request information on whether these chemicals entered the Swan River? Did they migrate off-site in the smoke and air pollution into the surrounding community? She then asks, has the Department of Health undertaken any assessment of the impacts of the fire pollution on the health of the surrounding residents and residential properties, and if not, why not? And then finally she asks, is council aware that the City of Swan and Cleanaway have instigated a community reference group for the redevelopment of the site and requesting council representation on this committee? Mr Gibson, would you mind giving a response to those questions, please?
Thank you, Madam. In terms of the first question, the letter has not yet been sent, but will be sent following Council's formal receipt of the report from the committee, which is being considered tonight. That letter can then be tabled at the next committee meeting in July, but can also be provided to Ms Bremer. In terms of question 2, the town hasn't sought advice from DEWA, but has sought advice from the Department of Fire and Emergency Services, who was responsible for actually fighting the fire. We're yet to receive confirmation whether firefighting foam was used, but if so, we can incorporate that into our subsequent request to DEWA. And I'd suggest that probably covers questions 3 and 4 as well. Going ahead to question 5, which is about the Department of Health. DEWA's Pollution Response Unit Action Report was actually provided to the Department of Health, but the town hasn't been advised what action the department has taken in response to that report. But that would obviously be a question for the Department of Health. In question 6, which is about the assessment, DEWA has prepared the Pollution Response Unit Action Report that was tabled at the LEMAC meeting. So yes, that has been done and that is publicly available. So jumping ahead to question 8, which was about the City of Swan Community Reference Group. No, the town's not aware of that, but the town will engage with its contemporaries at the City of Swan to obtain more information about that matter and what involvement is required, if any, from the town, which leads us to question 9 about the prospect of having Bassendean residents involved. Again, the town will make contact with the City of Swan about whether it's open to allowing town residents in joining that group. And all that information, once we've collated the responses from both Swan and DFES and DEWA, they can all be collated and forwarded through to Ms Bremer.
Fabulous. Thanks for that, Mr. Gibson. So there weren't any further questions from the public, but before we move on, we just need to insert an additional item onto the council agenda. I forwarded this through to Ms Holmes, the minute secretary. So councillors, this is just in regards to the suspension of various clauses within the local law and the modification to allow us to conduct this meeting remotely. So they relate particularly to the participation by members of the public, which is obviously needs to be modified in this format. So I'll just read out what the item is. So it's that council suspends the operation of clauses 6.8, 6.9, 6.12 and 6.17 of the Town of Bassendean Meeting Procedures Local Law 2020 for the duration of this electronic meeting, and that these matters be determined at the discretion of the presiding member, and that clauses that are modified that deal with public participation at a meeting are made to public. So the meeting is a public meeting, but it's open but not in person. 6.6, which is public question time. 6.7, other meetings, other procedures about public question time. 6.10, deputations. 6.11, petitions. So do we have somebody that is happy to move that motion?
Yes, Councillor Quinton, I move.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. I will second the motion. Is there anybody against? Okay, so that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We have no petitions this evening, so we'll move on to item 9, which is the confirmation of minutes. So first of all, 9.1A, this relates to the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 31st of March this year. So 9.1A, that the minutes be received. I'm happy to move that. Is there a seconder?
Yes, I second Councillor Quinton.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Is there anybody against? Okay, so that is carried. 9.1B, that those minutes be recorded or confirmed as a true record. I'm happy to move that. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Wilson here, happy to second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So that is carried unanimously, assuming no one is against. Item 10, this is business deferred from previous meetings. We have nothing, so we'll move on to item 11. So this is external committee reports and updates. So this is a new inclusion in the agenda under our new local law, with the intention being to make publicly available the minutes of meetings that our councillors participate in. So for this month's agenda, we have the Walga Special State Council meeting that was held on the 27th of March. We have an officer recommendation that these minutes be noted. Do we have a mover for the officer recommendation for 11.1?
Yes, I move that, Councillor Quinton.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Is there a seconder? I'll second that. Is there anybody against? So that is carried unanimously. So moving on to item 12. So looking at the reports that will be carried on block. At the moment, councillors, these are the reports that I have coming out of on block. So I have 12.2, the proposed front fence, 12.3, another proposed front fence, 12.4, the draft amended Anzac Terrace design guidelines, 12.5, the tree preservation orders, 12.6, the design review panel, 12.8, the disposal of lot 246 Morley Drive East, 12.9, the COVID-19 pandemic changes and budget parameters, 12.13, the monthly financial report, and 16.1, the confidential FOGO item. Are there any other reports that councillors would like taken out of on block?
Councillor Hamilton here. Could I please have 12.17 taken out of en bloc?
The quarterly report?
Correct.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry,
Any
sorry, can I confirm 13.1? Given that's a councillor motion.
So, Councillor Quinton, since your agenda was published, 13.1 was moved. 14 was listed under a notice of motion that was being announced for the next meeting. So no decisions required on that this evening.
Sorry, you cut out then. Can you repeat that?
So if I'm correct, you're asking about 13.1, which was the notice of motion from Councillor Hamilton. Is that correct, Councillor Quinton? Yeah. So the agenda that you would have received on Friday had the notice of motion listed under 13.1, which would mean that it was for a decision 14.1 as an announcement for the next meeting, in which case there's no decision required on that for this evening. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. You are breaking up a little bit, so perhaps you don't know that you are just breaking up slightly, but I understood you. Okay,
Thank you. All right, so with the inclusion of 12.17, the quarterly report, do I have a mover for the remainder to be carried on block? Okay, I'll move to carry it on block. Is there a seconder?
Councillor Wilson here, happy to second.
Okay, great. Is there anybody against?
Just want to confirm we've got 16.1 coming out, yes?
Yes. Okay, so there's no one
Thank
against. That is, sorry, Councillor Gangel.
No, I'm good. I'm in favour, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to item 12.2. This is the proposed front fence at 123 Purcell Loop. Are there any questions, first of all, for the staff?
Yes, so Councillor Gangel.
Councillor Gangel,
just with
would you mind just turning your video on so I know that you wish to speak as well, please?
Okay, bear with me. There we go. We're working now.
Yes,
just wanting to know, in relation to the officer recommendation, obviously the officers are comfortable with their recommendation, because I know there's been an alternative with quite a bit more detail in it, with guidelines and wishing to implement more, but the officers are comfortable with what they've recommended.
Thank you. Mr. Gibson, would you mind responding? I understand that you've had quite a bit of contact with Councillor Hamilton, who is the councillor that has proposed an amendment that Councillor Gangel is referring to. Would you mind, seeing as we're discussing the amendment as well. If you wouldn't mind answering Councillor Gangel's question, and then I'll get Councillor Hamilton to read her amendment so that it's clear the two things that we're discussing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, staff are still comfortable with the recommendation that was contained in last week's briefing agenda and tonight's council agenda. Obviously, at last week's briefing agenda, there were a few queries raised regarding the proponents' potential willingness to undertake some verge planting and some verge improvements in line with our recent policy position. Staff did make some inquiries with the two applicants, and both applicants were reasonably agreeable to that. So while staff are still comfortable with the recommendation to approve, we have obviously been involved in preparing some potential amendments, which both applicants are comfortable with.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Councillor Hamilton, did you wish to make councillors aware of the amendment that you have proposed with the staff?
Thank you. Yes. So basically, the amendment that I put forward incorporates the officer's recommendations, except for point 2, where I have made note of exceptions to 4 and 5, because that point 2 refers to works within the boundary of the properties. Point 4, which is my addition, is prior to the commencement of works on site, a detailed landscape plan being submitted and approved to the satisfaction of the town. The plan is to include details of the location and type of proposed trees, shrubs and ground cover areas to be planted, including a verge area, and as well as details of the proposed watering system to ensure the establishment and survival of plantings. And 5, within 60 days of the completion of the fence, the landscaping and irrigation of the verge is to be installed in accordance with the approved landscape plan and thereafter maintained to the satisfaction of the town. Sorry.
Thank you. And councillors, the amendment that Councillor Hamilton has proposed has just been provided by Liz in the meeting chat. If you wish to have a look at what has been put forward. Are there any other questions at the moment? Councillor Hamilton.
Yes, if I may ask the officer, Luke, Mr. Gibson, these amendments came about because I did a site visit and observed that there was possibly some issues with lack of vegetation within the properties, which I believe was a condition of approval originally in 2013. Would that be right, Mr. Gibson?
For you, Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. So there was a development approval issued for the site that was accompanied by a condition which required the preparation of a landscaping plan and the subsequent implementation. A site visit would confirm that the state of the landscaping does not accord with the approved landscaping plan, and therefore it represents a compliance issue, which staff will deal with separately.
Thanks, Mr. Gibson. Councillor Gangel, I saw that you may have had a question.
Yeah, so all I wanted just to check, just to confirm that the applicants are happy and willing with the alternative recommendation that Councillor Hamilton's put up. So my understanding is from the officers, yes, that's correct. They're quite satisfied if that got up.
Thanks, Councillor Gangel. Mr. Gibson, would you mind just confirming?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct. We touched base with both applicants because there's 2 separate applications and both are comfortable with this approach.
Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, so we have an officer recommendation and we have a amended motion that's been proposed by Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Hamilton, are you planning on moving your amended motion?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to second that. Is there anybody against the motion? Okay, so then that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. So moving on to 12.3, which is a very similar item in relation to the fence on the adjacent property. Are there any questions at all on this item? And just also bringing to your attention that Councillor Hamilton has proposed a very similar amendment for this item. Liz, if you're able to post that in the chat, that would be fantastic. Councillor Hamilton, did you wish to move your amendment?
I certainly do. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm happy to second that again. Is there anybody against this? Okay, in that case, that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. So item 12.4, I have a proximity interest in, so I will leave the meeting and ask Councillor Hamilton to take over temporarily.
Thank you. First of all, are there any questions of the officers in respect to this item? No? Okay. So would someone like to move this item? Okay, then I will move this item, 12.4. Is there a seconder?
Yes,
I
I
second it,
second
Councillor
it.
McWilliam.
I heard two voices there. So Councillor McWilliam, you're seconding?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone against? No, so that is carried. I will invite the Mayor back to preside.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. So item 12.5 now, this is the tree preservation orders proposed for the 8 Morley Drive East. Councillor Gangio, did you have a question on this item?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Look, what I would just want to get an understanding for, just firstly, unfortunately I missed the briefing session last week. In relation, I know there was some mention in the report, but could I just get an outline from the officers? Is it because they haven't done their design plans yet for the site is the reasoning why they don't want the preservation orders?
Mr Gibson?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, that's a good summary. They contend that they would prefer to do the design first and from that determine what trees they could retain. That's their position, yes.
So I have a further question, maybe for the CEO, just in this item. Now they haven't done their design plans yet. I'm just wondering if we could use a like-for-like scenario and Wilson Street car park where the town has potential to develop that site or is looking at somewhere down the line of development on that site. Why then would the council not receive a report on preservation orders now on the trees on that site, despite a development not being done? Or a development plan not being done?
Thanks, Councillor Gangio. Ms Mabs, are you able to respond to that question? And Councillor Hamilton, I've seen you do have a question.
Thanks, Councillor Gangel and Madam Mayor. I think the time frame around the Eden Hill parcel of land and Wilson Street is somewhat different. So the Wilson Street car park site is one that the town is exploring, and there are still discussions to be had at a state government level in that regard. So no decision has been made by council to purchase that site at this stage. So we're still some way off. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Gangio?
For now, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, you have a question.
When you're ready, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Is there a seconder for the officer's recommendation?
Yes, I second Councillor Quinton.
Okay. Is there anybody against the
Your Worship, yeah, I think you're asking if there's anybody against. Yes, I'm
Yep.
against. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, would you like to debate this item?
Yes, I'll keep it short. Basically, this tree preservation is not particularly difficult, because the proponent, when they do provide a development planning application to the town, there is always the ability for the staff, the administration, to negotiate with the proponents in respect to their development. So it does not preclude the removal of trees. All it does is facilitate preservation of these trees, particularly whilst the land is unutilised. The trees provide bird habitat, they provide shade, canopy, contribute to the reduction in urban heat island effect. So I see no issues with this in the timeline it takes between now and when the proponent may put in a development application for plans. So at this moment, I think it's a good way to go. We certainly have enough blocks of land around the town that have been completely taken back to bare earth, and I think that this is a good interim measure to preserve what's on site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Quinton, did you wish to speak?
No, I just concur with everything Councillor Hamilton has had to say. I will, and she did point to this, but should the developer put in an application to remove the tree, to develop the land, they can also put in an application to remove the trees. So it's not as though these trees can't be factored in to a new proposal, or that this inhibits them in any way. What this does is put some value on those trees, one of them which is worth $250,000. So at this stage, I think it's worth us putting the preservation on it and giving it a priority.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Councillor Gangel?
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, on this item, clearly some people have contacted me over the past week just in relation to the town's own actions. We obviously removed some trees at the men's shed block. I believe that outcome was required, and I understand that whilst every endeavour should be made to retain the trees on a site, there are times when that's not possible. Certainly in this current climate, I don't want to put limitations on or prohibitions on getting investment into the town, particularly with this site. I think the town should be looking to work as cooperatively as possible with the owners of the site. Obviously, they came and gave a deputation to council last week, requesting that they be allowed to do their development plans and submit their applications. I think we should endeavour to work with them, and they've requested just to be allowed to do their plans first. I don't think they've got any concrete decisions yet made on what's going to happen, and I appreciate there's a significant tree right in the centre of the block, which would be fantastic to be retained. But in the current climate, I would certainly advocate to get investment in, especially in this location, and work with the applicants as much as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gangel. I'll just respond quickly to some of the points you just raised. You mentioned the need to work with the applicants or the owners of the property. I think the process that the town has gone through recent months, working with the owners of this site in order to look at an amalgamation of the sites there with the town-owned lot, demonstrates that council and the applicants are working together. I don't believe that putting a tree preservation on these trees is putting limitations on the site. As Councillor Hamilton and Quinton mentioned, tree preservation orders can be removed. So at such time as a development application is submitted, if one or more of those trees is required to accommodate the development, that can be a discussion at that time. I see the tree preservation orders at this stage being more about ensuring that those trees are protected until such time as development occurs, at least. So as you would be aware, there is no timeline at the moment for development of that site, so it may be a number of years before anything further happens, in which case we could benefit from those trees for the duration of that time. And as councillors would also be aware, there's a request on tonight's agenda for the buyback clause that was part of the offer and acceptance of sale documents to be removed, which further indicates that there's no definite timeline for development at this stage. Although the property owners have indicated their intention to make progress quickly, we have no definite time frame. So protecting these trees in the interim is a priority, I believe, for our community without imposing any unrealistic limitations on the site long term. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this item? Councillor Hamilton, did you want your right of... Sorry, who was that? Can you just turn your camera on so that I can see you as well, because there's a delay with the audio coming in.
Yes, my camera is on and my audio is on at my end.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to speak in favour of the officer recommendation. The trees are significant, as the arborist report shows. One of the trees has a value of $250,000 using the standard accepted methodology for valuing trees. As Councillor Hamilton pointed out, and yourself, Your Worship, there is nothing to prevent plans being submitted that might seek to remove the trees, but my hope would be that trees of this nature would be able to be incorporated into good design, and should that issue arise, we can all deal with it then. This location has sat derelict for the best part of 20 years. It is an eyesore and a blight on our community. I hope that it is developed in a timely way, but in a way that incorporates the natural environment that's in place. And I recall from the concept plans that the developer were keen to show us, they were keen to incorporate the large tree in the middle of the block, and I would hope that they would also be able to make similar recommendations for the other trees on the verge.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do any other councillors wish to speak? Okay, in that case, Councillor Hamilton, did you want your right of reply?
No, I'll waive that. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Gangel is against the motion, is that correct?
Correct, Your Worship.
Are there any other councillors against the motion? Okay, in that case, I'll declare that carried. So moving on now, councillors, to item 12.6. This is the proposed plan design review panels. Are there any questions to begin with? Councillor Hamilton?
I sent an email through to Mr. Gibson. I can't remember now, yesterday, I think. Anyway, it related to, obviously, we're looking at utilising the design review panel set up by City of Bayswater. And I understand that this is just to accept the formula of working with Bayswater to utilise their panel. However, the agenda document states that the amount that would be on charge is $3,000, and that differs from the amount published on the City of Bayswater's website. So I just wanted to confirm with the officer that when it comes to the budget fees and charges, that as a council we will be able to look at what Bayswater charge and potentially implement the same sort of charging regime. Would that be correct?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Broadly, yes, that is quite correct. The fee of $3,000 provided in the officer report was provided as an estimated maximum that would effectively reflect the existing $2,500 fee provided by Bayswater, would allow potential increase of that fee in the next financial year, and would cover any administrative costs incurred by the town in handling that fee. That would be a full cost recovery model to add all those other elements in and to have a fee of somewhat greater than $2,500. But the bottom line is, as as you say, Councillor Hamilton, that is a decision not for tonight, but that's a decision for the schedule of fees and charges as part of the budget process. And it's open to council to apply a fee at full cost recovery, or apply no fee, or apply a fee in between.
Thanks, Mr. Gibson. Councillor Gandry, did you have a question?
Sorry, I think Mr. Gibson just actually answered my question at the tail end there. So I just wanted to confirm. So tonight, we're not deciding whether or not we will set a fee or not. That is for the budget process where we need to determine that, correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. This topic generated a bit of discussion on my Facebook page last night. Mr. Gibson, could you just confirm the developments that fit the scale of the terms of reference, they would be required to participate, or is it still an optional process?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It would be a mandatory process. Other applications that don't fall within this could seek to voluntarily access the panel on a cost basis, but the suite of applications provided for in the terms of reference would be mandatory.
So just following on from that, the question was asked what the head of power is to charge that on. I'm not sure if that's something that you're able to advise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, the Planning Development Regulations 2009 sets out the fee and charging structure in relation to planning matters. Regulation 49 1B allows council to recoup the costs associated with any specific assessment required in relation to an application. Obviously, if council adopts this policy, the policy of council will be that certain applications require independent design review. That comes at a cost. So the Regulation 49 would allow that cost to be passed on to the applicant.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And one last question. It was raised whether there needed to be a scheme amendment to clause 67 about matters to be considered in order to provide for decision makers to be required to take into account the advice from a design review panel, whether the planning policy would be adequate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would suggest the existing framework's adequate. Clause 67 of the Planning and Development Regulations 2015 sets out a whole series of things that need to be considered by the decision maker, and that it goes through to ZB, so that gives you an indication of how long the list is. And incidentally, ZB is any other planning consideration the local government considers appropriate, so it's just a catch-all at the end. I'd suggest the advice from a panel probably sits more appropriately somewhere before that, but I won't bore you with going through line by line, but even if it doesn't, it's caught at the bottom by ZB.
Fabulous, that's really helpful, thank you. Councillor Gandry, did you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to check, because we're modelling this very much on the Bayswater model. Also, we're going to use we're anticipating to use their panel as well. Just wanting to check, are they mandatory as well to utilise this panel at Bayswater, or is that optional at Bayswater? I thought it was optional at Bayswater should people wish to use the panel.
Through you, Madam Mayor, our understanding is that it is mandatory for those applications set out in their terms of reference. And similarly, if applicants outside those or other applications applicants wanted to access the expertise of the panel, could pay for that service, but it was the mandatory applications are the ones quoted in the policy.
Thank you. My connection just dropped out there for a minute, so I apologise. Are there any other questions from councillors? Okay, in that case, do we have a mover for the officer recommendation? Oh, Councillor Hamilton, is that a question or moving?
I'd like to move it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Is there a seconder? Okay, I'll second that. Is there anybody against? Okay, so that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. So moving now on to item 12.8. This is the disposal of 246 Morley Drive East with the proposed change of special conditions. Are there any questions for the staff to begin with?
Yes, Councillor Wilson here. For the benefit of those following along at home, could you please provide an outline on when it was that the proponent changed its mind about this clause and sought to have it removed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and find the exact date. However, it was certainly at a date after Council had resolved to dispose of the site in accordance with the special conditions. So the offer, as it were, that Council considered was current and valid at the time, and the latest change occurred subsequent to Council's meeting.
So just to confirm that up until that point and in all of the dealings with the town, the proponent was happy for that clause to be included and in fact included that clause in their own legal drafting, and then after Council made the decision to dispose of the block, they then came back to the town and said, oh, could you please remove this clause? Have I got that right?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that is all 100% correct.
And did the proponent give any indication as to what had somehow changed that had led to it asking for this clause to be removed?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not beyond what is contained on pages 32 and 33 of the Council agenda, which is broadly the proponent's justification for their request. That is effectively what they've put forward.
Mr. Gibson, I just had a question in relation to what the potential buyer did submit. So on page 32.3, it refers to the residential portion of the land and their hope to have this approved quickly and to have that portion of land subdivided off. The first time that I'd heard of them potentially subdividing, I'm wondering, are they now indicating that their intention is not to develop the site holistically? I was going to have partners to develop the portion, but not necessarily the planning for the two components would be done separately.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, everyone.
I wasn't able to.
Just completely missed that whole question. I'm not sure if everybody else had an interruption in their streaming just now, but everything that the Mayor just said, I missed. Could you repeat the question, please?
Madam Mayor, if you'd like, I will try and answer what I understand the question to be, and that is in relation to the sequencing of events on the site and the interplay between development and subdivision. The advice from the applicant group has reasonably consistently been that they are prepared to do the planning for the entire site, being the commercial and the residential, and have that formalised through a local development plan, development approval as the case may be. And once that's agreed on and approved, they would be seeking to subdivide off the residential component to a residential developer for them to implement in accordance with that approved framework. Hopefully that answers the question, but I'm happy to take other questions as required.
Hello, everybody back. I'm sorry. Can people...
Councillor Hamilton, I'm just wondering, in the absence of the Mayor, her screen seems to be frozen at the moment. I'm not sure if there's any audio, whether it would be appropriate for you to continue to chair.
Yes, I was just thinking that. May I just check first with the Mayor? Madam Mayor, would you like to speak to see if we've got audio with you? We certainly don't have vision. Okay, so it looks like the Mayor has dropped out completely with her connection. So, and she is having trouble reconnecting. Ah, you're back. Okay.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, if you'd like to take over presiding again.
Before you stop, Councillor Hamilton, did we progress any further?
No, we did not.
Okay, so when I lost contact, I just asked Mr. Gibson about the in two parts, the residential and the commercial, and unfortunately I didn't hear a response was given.
Madam Mayor, again, you are breaking up quite badly. Your video, your audio is poor. Your video is intermittent. It's freezing every so often. And you're back again.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'll skip my question because it's not important at the moment.
Now we can hear you perfectly.
You can hear me perfectly?
Yes.
Great. I'm sorry about that. My apologies. I'll ask Mr. Gibson my question later because it doesn't seem to be working in my favour. Are there any other questions, though, from councillors on 12.8? Okay. In that case, we have an officer recommendation before us. Is there somebody who would like to move the officer recommendation?
Yes, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation, Your Worship.
Okay, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second your
Councillor
Worship.
Gangel?
Yep. Yes, happy to second if you didn't get that.
Councillor Gangel, can you hear me?
Yep. You hear?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you seconding?
Okay. Yeah, correct.
Thank you. Is there anybody against?
Yes, Councillor Wilson here. I'm against.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. All right, I'll just speak very briefly. I think last month this item came before council and the decision was made to dispose of this site. Clearly, this site has been underdeveloped and derelict for a long period of time, and our community and council is clearly keen to see it developed. At present, there are no plans for us for this site. However, we have a buyer who has expressed interest in developing the town's land in conjunction with their own land. I'm not sure whether you can still hear me. Although they have not been willing to set a definite time frame for development, I can understand some of their reasons. It'd be great to have something locked in so that we can give some certainty to our community that there would be improvements on this site that would add to the amenity of the local area sooner rather than later. In the current conditions, that would be very difficult. The clause that they are seeking to remove really does not add much to the sale of this land. It would require the town to buy back the lot, which may or may not be of benefit to the town. And as we are aware, the clause only requires the potential buyers to break the soil. My apologies, I'm not sure whether you can hear me. I'm going to stop speaking now and give Councillor Gangel the opportunity to speak if he wishes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, more than happy to support the officer recommendation. This is one of these things in the current climate. We need to look at how we can support investment coming into the town. Investment is not a dirty word. It is a very, very good thing for the town to get. This is very exciting, I think, that we're getting to this stage. We also, obviously, the funds that we'll get from the sale of this land would be very valuable at this point in time for other potential projects that we'd like to have undertaken. So I do agree with Her Worship that the clause they're looking to remove is a minor clause and isn't significant with what is required for them to undertake for that clause then not to be able to come into play in any case. So look, I'm just hoping that we encourage and we work with people that are interested to come into the town, bring money, bring value to our town, bring investment, bring jobs to our town in this current environment. And certainly it's a very, very small way and a very, very small part that we can play our way in getting investment and getting jobs and getting people back out working in our community and for the betterment of obviously the Eden Hill area, which they've been solely waiting for, as I think Councillor Wilson mentioned, about 2 decades now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gangel. Councillor Wilson, did you wish to speak?
Yes, Your Worship. Councillor Gangel was absent at the last council meeting and may have missed that I moved the motion to accept the sale of this block for all of the reasons that he just outlined then. Yes, we need to see this block developed. The reason that I want to speak against this motion, however, is this clause was presented to the town by the proponent. It was a feature of the proponent's offer of sale up to and including the point at which we accepted their offer. And then now, after having secured our agreement, they want to come back and change the terms. Now, they're entitled to make this request and council is entitled to accept it or reject it if it so chooses. And I'm happy with whatever council does decide to do. But for me, it reeks of bad faith. It is not a good portend to what their future behaviour is. And so I want to make the point absolutely clearly now that if this proponent is going to give up undertakings to our community and to our council, it ought follow through on those undertakings and not seek to wriggle out of them at the last minute. Act in good faith, be upfront with our community about what your plans are, and you will get fair treatment back from us. But to seek to wriggle around after an offer has already been accepted, for me, is poor form, and for that reason I can't accept it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion?
Madam Mayor, I want to speak for the motion.
Oh, yes, please, Councillor Hamilton.
I take on board what Councillor Wilson has said. However, when the applicant put forward her offer, it wasn't a time pre-COVID. In a business situation, I can understand why the proponent would like some flexibility. I too would like to see the property developed in a timely fashion. I would like to see it developed holistically so that it actually is a shining light in the Eden Hill area rather than the derelict site that it is at the moment. When weighing up this particular clause, in my mind, it is, as stated by Councillor Gangel, a relatively minor clause in that it's unlikely, given the costs of repurchasing the land at whatever the higher value is, be it, the market value at the time. There's also all the fees attached with repurchasing it. I do not see that as being something that is particularly viable for the town in some future date or with some future council. So I don't perceive this as being a clause upon which the whole deal hangs. So on one hand, I understand, we went into this months and months ago with lots of discussions. However, the economic and financial landscape of our city has changed. And as such, I do understand why the proponent might wish to have a little bit of flexibility. And so I'm willing to actually give that. Also, there's the fact that the offer came to us as an unsigned offer. So it has gone back now, signed by the town, and come back with this clause crossed out as a signed offer. So, really, do we want to go back to square one with all of this, or do we want to proceed disposing of a parcel of land that we have no intention of developing it ourselves? So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Okay, in that case, we'll put this to the vote. So, Councillor Wilson, are you against the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'm against the motion.
Are there any other councillors who wish to vote against the motion? Okay, in that case, I declare it carried. We'll move on to 12.9 now, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, changes to the 2019-20 budget and budget setting parameters and principles for the next financial year. Are there any questions for the staff?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Gangel.
Yes. So my first question is, I just noticed with the Swan Districts Football Club, I noticed all other sporting organisations are actually receiving 100% fee waivers, but yet the Swan Districts Football Club is receiving 50%. I'm just wondering why the Swan Districts Football Club isn't treated as equals to everybody else with 100% waiver. That's my first question.
Thank you. Is that a question for Mr. White or for our CEO?
Well, whichever one can answer.
Thank you. I was actually asking them.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Gangel. I actually discussed this proposal with the CEO from Swan Districts in terms of what the officer recommendation would be. He seemed quite delighted at the proposal. So it is really a decision for council to make whether or not it would like to offer 100%. What you have in front of you is a suite of measures that officers have come up with. There's been some discussion with councillors, but these are things that we believe will really help our community. So if there's anything on there that you would like to propose an amendment to, or anything you'd like to see in addition or delete, these are a suite of offerings that we identified where people were impacted like Swan districts. Discussions have been had in that regard. Thank you.
You had further questions, Councillor Gangel?
I did, Your Worship, and I just, given the current state of the waffle competition and the fact that all teams are unlikely to survive in the current climate of waffle, I think we should look at giving a 100% waiver, and I'll be happy to move as such. Now, the other question that I have, just in cost savings, I note what's not there, and I'll be very interested to hear from the CEO. She produced some figures on Friday, which estimated that we'll be spending somewhere in the proximity of $230,000 in one financial year on weed management. I'm just wondering if the CEO, is that one of the areas we're looking at cost saving? Because $230,000 in one financial year seems to be a lot of money on weed management.
Thanks, Councillor Gangel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Gangel. Thank you. Weed management, we're actually working on a strategy for the entire district, the entire town, to look at the appropriate responses for different areas, whether it's natural bush near the river, parks, reserves, on footpaths, etc. And we've engaged as at late last year and also undertaken some community consultation to develop a strategy. Now that strategy is currently going through a process where it will be costed and a report will be provided to council. So prior to the new financial year, we hope to have a cost model to present to council in that regard. And there's some of the considerations that council will need to make as part of the budget for next financial year. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Councillor Gangel, did you have additional questions?
No, they were my two questions. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask?
I have my camera on, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask a question.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't see you yet.
Okay. It's a follow-on question from Councillor Gangel's comments, and I'm not sure who would like to address this through the Mayor. But I'm reading the officer's recommendation where clearly the lease, I think it's 3.3b, the lease rental suspension for sporting and community groups is proposed to only go until the 31st of October 2020. However, the licensing payable for Swan districts was for the full calendar year of 50%. So I'm assuming the administration, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the administration have looked at this in respect to equity. Would that be correct? Because there's different timelines there, obviously.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hamilton. The football season, as you know, finishes up around October, which is essentially in terms of the income stream that Swans receive, in terms of tickets and so on to get onto the grounds, attend footy games. So it usually finishes around that time in any event. We've also considered a further budget review in November where there's an opportunity to rethink, reset some of these assumptions. So if some things need to be clawed back or continue on, or new measures need to be introduced, that would provide the appropriate opportunity then.
So if I may, I have had discussion with yourself and the Mayor today regarding my amendments. So when people are ready, I would like to actually read out those amendments, but I'm sure there's other questions as well.
Hello, Councillor Wilson here. I too have some questions. Hello, Your Worship, are you with us?
Hello, yes, I am. Sorry, it's cutting in and out a bit. You're welcome to ask your questions, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. So it's in relation to the decision that we made at a previous council meeting to pass on a 0% rate increase to our community, and the part of the officer's report which deals with the state government's current intention to go ahead with the changes to the gross rental value this financial year. My understanding of the way that the algorithm for the gross rental value works is that if there is a change to the gross rental value applied, that it will be almost impossible for our town to neatly pass on a 0% rate increase. Do I understand that correctly?
I might allow our Director of Corporate Services to answer that one, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and through you, Madam Mayor. The way the rates calculation will operate will be the only way the town could levy the same rates to the same ratepayers as it did last year would be if the effect of the revaluation was uniform across all property within the town. Now, obviously, in practice, that is not going to occur. Some properties will be revalued upwards, some properties will be revalued downwards, and some properties may stay around the same. And the properties that go up, some might go up by a small amount and some might go up by a large amount, and vice versa for the properties that reduce. So it will be impossible for the town to levy the same rates for the same properties as it did last year. The town can structure its overall rate program such that it derives the same or a similar amount of revenue from its rates book as it did last year, but that will mean that the rates levied on individual properties will be different to what they were last year. And even though there might have been a revaluation downwards, I think on average of around about 13%, some property that may have been revaluated downwards by less than the average will still experience an increase in rates.
So thanks for that, and that sort of matches my understanding, but I also have been reading through this a bit, and it seems to me that even if, say, the Valuer General indicates that all of the properties have dropped in gross rental value by a uniform amount, because of the way the algorithm works, it's still going to lead to different outcomes for different houses. So, for example, if it was dropped and then the rate in the dollar was increased, somebody with high rates, their rates would go up, and somebody with low rates, their rates would go down, and some in the middle would stay the same. So even if there was a uniform change made to the rate in the dollar, it would still lead to varied outcomes, even for properties with the same percentage variation on their gross rental value. Is that how you read it too?
I might have to take that on notice, Councillor Wilson. I would need to conduct some further research in relation to that. We have been provided with some revalued amounts for around about 90% of the properties in the town, and I can tell you that that it varies from around, going from memory here, but around about some properties might have increased by up to 8 or 9%, and some properties may have fallen by up to 25%. So there is a huge variation across property within the town, which will produce large variations in rates levied on those properties from last year.
And is it true that if the state government deferred this decision for 1 year, if they moved it down the line by 1 year, that we would be able to pass on a 0% rate increase to all of our ratepayers uniformly?
Yes, I believe we could, yes.
Okay, all right, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson and Mr. White. Just for the benefit of other councillors who might not be aware, we're in the process of preparing a letter to send to our state representatives to continue to advocate for deferral of the revaluation in order to allow us to pass on that 0% rate increase for our ratepayers. And WELGA has been advocating on behalf of local governments as well, but to date there has not been a positive response from the state government. So we will continue, and any other councillors who also wish to support that, it would be appreciated. Are there other questions from councillors?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Quinton.
Thanks, Councillor Quinton.
Yeah, it's about Wind in the Willows Children's Services. I just wonder if the CEO might give an up-to-date response to any of the lobbying efforts and how and you know what it is that's being said to state and federal government representatives about the loss of funding that we are looking down the barrel of, and if we might be getting some up-to-date responses, knowing that I think some parents sent their children back to daycare this week.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. I guess just by way of background, the federal government introduced an early childhood education and care package for all childcare providers. Now, the way in which it operates, if you're outside the local government sphere, it would have been seen as a real benefit. But if you're inside the local government sphere, it can actually operate to disadvantage the local government. It is a measure that is designed to operate in tandem with the JobKeeper program. Unfortunately for local governments, particularly the town of Bassendean, which was actually doing quite well in terms of attendance numbers, the impact of the federal government early childhood education and care package has left us in a disadvantaged position. So where we were earning around $70,000 per fortnight, that has dropped to around $41,900 per fortnight because of this measure. Now, there is a provision under the early childhood education and care package that enables us to apply for an exceptional circumstance supplementary relief payment. The town has submitted for the relief payment, which would effectively, if we're deemed suitable, would bridge that gap. And that would, I understand, be paid on a fortnightly basis. And I can hand you over to the Director of Corporate Services to get an update as to where we're at with that application, which was submitted a couple of weeks ago. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I don't have anything to add to that. My understanding is that we have actually submitted the application, but I'm not aware of any response having been received at this point.
Thanks, Mr. White. Councillor Quinton, did you have further questions?
Yes, actually, just a point of clarity around our commitment to a 0% rate revenue. Can I just clarify that we've actually passed or committed to a 0% rate revenue increase, given the actual motion that we passed was to request the CEO to prepare a budget based on that scenario, that we actually haven't committed to a 0% rate revenue. We've only asked you to prepare a budget based on a 0% rate revenue. And yet on page 38, it states that we have committed to it. So can I just clarify whether we have or not, please?
So there was a resolution, as you mentioned, can't remember the exact date, in March, where Council did agree to the CEO preparing a budget scenario based on a 0% rate revenue increase. So that scenario we were intending to deliver in June when we submit the budget. Obviously, we are trying to balance that against our income, cash flow, expenditure, priority projects, etc. So that is something that we will work closely with Council on over the next couple of months, and also advocating to different tiers of government for stimulus funding as well. And it is a very dynamic environment at the moment. So we still, I guess the local government sector has still not really benefited from any direct state or federal funding. So that's where we're at right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Mabs. Councillor Quinton, is that all from you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from councillors?
Yeah, Councillor Wilson here.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson.
I'm just wondering if the officers are aware of the package that the New South Wales state government has put forward to local government, a package providing relief to the New South Wales local government sector in the order of $350 million, and whether there's any indication that the West Australian state government will be following suit.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yes, I did discuss that with Welga this morning and raised it with them. They are aware of the New South Wales economic stimulus package for local governments. Unfortunately, they haven't been successful to date in securing anything similar, but we'll certainly watch this space. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Mabs. Any other questions at this stage?
Myself, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank
Following on from Councillor Quinton's questions and also the response from the CEO, may I ask, with the supplementary relief application, is there a timeline, in when we're going to get a response to that application? My main reason for asking is that clearly there are provisions for private childcare operators to leverage off financial benefits which are unavailable to local government. And that puts our operation of childcare at a distinct disadvantage. And I would like to know if the state government actually are going to respond in a timely fashion to that application.
So just to clarify, Councillor Hamilton, I believe it's to the federal government that the application's been made. Is that correct?
Correct, you're correct. Sorry about that. But yes, timely response would be good, given that financially we are definitely at a disadvantage compared to private operators.
You are absolutely correct, Councillor Hamilton. And the provision is made by the federal government, and the application, I understand, is made through the Department of Communities as the regulator for childcare centres. I would hope with most of these sort of relief packages that they're applied retrospectively, so that from the moment that we were disadvantaged, we would be able to receive some sort of funding to bridge the gap that we've suffered. And I understand the idea is the relief is provided on a fortnightly basis, so it would be regular income to the town to make up for the loss of earnings as a result of the federal government's early childhood education and care package and the adverse impact that's had. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any further questions? So, councillors, I'll just bring your attention to the chat on the side where Ms Nichols has kindly posted a proposed amendment that Councillor Hamilton has submitted. You'll notice...
Your Worship, I've actually got just a further question. I just noticed on the recommendation. It just mentions that waives the fee for the naming rights Steel Blue Oval if they don't receive the fee this year. Again, I'm a little bit concerned because Waffle is on its knees. There's 9 clubs. I think of the 9 clubs, only 3 are actually viable, and Swans certainly isn't one of the 3. It is a key component to the town of Bassendean, the Swan Districts Football Club. I'm just wondering why that's only been waived if they don't receive the naming rights sponsorship, because there is no income going into the club. So obviously, I think we need to look at seriously how we want to support the Swan Districts Football Club in the current climate.
Thanks, Councillor Gangel. Ms Mabs?
Thank you for that, Madam Mayor and Councillor Gangel. As mentioned, I did discuss these 2 measures with Jeff Dennis, the CEO. He was accepting of them. There is provision for council to make additional measures. This paper was really designed to start, I guess, shaping the budget settings for next financial year. Over the coming period and leading up to delivery of the budget in June, there will be further discussions with councillors. We still haven't addressed our asset management program yet. So there are still further opportunities to implement additional measures should council so choose. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gangel, was that your final question?
Yes, but I just seek clarity on it, Your Worship. Should I wish to provide more options in relation to what's proposed for the Swan Districts Football Club, am I required to speak against the motion in its entirety?
Well, nobody has moved the motion yet, so somebody could either move the officer recommendation as written or an amended motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move my amended motion when questions are finished.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. So, Councillor Gangel, Councillor Hamilton has provided a proposed amendment in advance of the meeting, which is documented in the meeting chat for your reference. Yeah. Obviously, she needs a seconder for her motion, which I'm happy to do. So then you would need to seek Councillor Hamilton to amend it further if you wish to propose something additional.
Well, I mean, it might not be acceptable, but I'm looking at waiving the Swan Districts Football Club fees by 100% for the year. The Steel Blue stuff, I'm not so much concerned with if we waive the fee. I'm just very concerned that Waffle is not in a good financial position at all in the current climate.
Thanks, Councillor Gangel. So just to confirm, you would like to propose to Councillor Hamilton as the mover of the amended motion, which we will outline in a moment, that she changes point 3, section C, to completely waive the Bassendean Oval licence fee payable for this year, and leave in what is currently point D.
Councillor Wilson here with a question.
Councillor Wilson, can you just hold that for a moment before? I just wanted to hear what Councillor Gangel's response was.
Yeah, no, that's correct, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just after an understanding then of what the financial impact of Councillor Gangel's proposed amendment would be.
Mr. White, are you able to provide that information?
Yes, I can. It will be double what's in the paper because we proposed for a 50%.
So it's the 17,500, is that correct?
Yep. Yes, so it'd be $35,000 would be the fee for the year.
So just to confirm then, if Councillor Gaingel's amendment was successful, that would be an additional $17,000 impost on our revenue, bringing that to a total of $35,000.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Wilson.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, you have moved and I've seconded your amended motion. I'm assuming, seeing as no councillor has spoken up, that they all have access to the amendment. Would you like to accept Councillor Gansel's amendment or not?
On the face of it, I'm tempted to not accept that amendment simply because this is just proposing budget parameters for our financial people to work to, and that we have the opportunity during the budget process to extend further concessions to various entities in the town. So I do take your point though, Councillor Gangel, that you know, the waffle clubs are suffering. May I ask you a question, Councillor Gangel? Would you be,
absolutely.
Yes, would you be prepared to revisit this if we do a 50% discount as per the amended motion? Would you be prepared to revisit this during the budget process when we have a clearer idea in the next 2 months as to the direction that the state government is taking with all the various relief measures being offered, and perhaps the relaxing of COVID issues? Would you be willing to do that or not?
Look, it's probably more the opposite for me. I think if we've got it there, and then I just personally think that the Swan District Football Club won't be in the best financial shape at the current, especially with no income coming in this season. It looks like the waffle isn't going to return. So look, I mean, if I'm able just to take out point C in debate, I'm happy just to debate point C. All the others I'm happy with, but it's just point C that I wish to debate.
Okay.
Okay, so Councillor Hamilton, as the mover of the motion, are you incorporating Councillor Gangel's proposal for point C in or not?
So may I ask, Madam Mayor, Councillor Gangel has indicated that he's happy to debate point C, 3C on its merits before we go to the substantive motion. So is that how we proceed? Would you like to proceed that way? Because I would prefer to leave it out, but I am happy to debate it and to follow the will of the majority of councillors on that point.
Okay, it's not really following the meeting procedure because we should have it incorporated into a motion, but it needs to be moved and seconded. So what you're proposing is that we suspend the rest of the discussion, but we debate point C at this point in time. So if you're happy to do that as the mover, I'm happy with that as well. Councillor Gangel.
Madam Mayor, I'm having thoughts on this and thinking it's only an extra $17,500. Let's just accept it.
Okay, thank you. So as the seconder, I'm happy to accept that as well. So in this case, we've now have your amended motion, which includes at point 3C a complete waiving of the Bassendean Oval licence fees for 2020. Would you mind outlining the other changes and amendments to the motion compared to the officer recommendation that you are proposing, Councillor Hamilton?
Okay, so basically the officer's recommendation remains the same for point 1 and point 2. Point 3A and point 3B, the date changes to the 30th of September, as does point 4, if only because that follows the financial quarters. And as I have stated previously, we can extend any of these, but those dates were changed from 30th of October 31st of October in the officer's recommendation back to 30th of September. Point 4, point C, 3C has changed to 100% as per the requests of Councillor Gangel for Swan Districts. Point 4, I'll read that out, waives food and health inspection fees until the 30th of September 2020 for targeted small businesses as defined by the ATO adversely affected by COVID-19. And point 5, suspends the town's sponsorship and grants program for 2021, effective immediately, in addition to major events including NARDOC on Australia Day. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
In there, please?
Hold on a moment. Is that Councillor Quinton with your microphone on?
Yes.
Just before you ask your question, I just wanted to point out to councillors that in the officer recommendation, there's a point 4 that relates to the waiving of instalment plan administration fees and also interest charges on the rates for the coming financial year. So Councillor Hamilton's motion excludes the entirety of what was point 4 in the officer recommendation. And maybe our CEO could comment on this. There were some discussions when Councillor Hamilton put forward her amendment earlier today between myself, the CEO, and Councillor Hamilton in relation to both of those aspects, so the instalment fees and interest charges. Given that we have yet to finalise the hardship policy, which I believe staff will be bringing to councillors in a draft form potentially later this week, that the thinking was that those two aspects could be deferred for decision until we had that information available. Is that correct, Ms Mabs?
That's correct, Madam Mayor. We do have a suite of policies which will be provided to councillors as part of the bulletin end of next week. They will deal with debt collection and hardship, and I would think that proceeding with recommendation 4 at this stage, particularly if there were potential changes to tighten it up, might actually contravene or I guess impact or have unintended consequences for those policies that are under preparation, and the policies should be able to stand on their own and deal with this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quinton, I believe you had a question?
Yeah, so just a point of clarity around what is now point 4 and was the original point 5 in the officer's recommendation in defining which businesses would have their food and health inspection fees waived. Originally, it said excluding large retail chains, fast food outlets and supermarkets, and it's now defined as targeted small businesses as defined by the ATO. So what is the difference, given that a fast food outlet could be defined as a small business?
Thanks, Councillor Quinton. It's a good question, and one that there's been some conversation around as well. So maybe, Ms Mabs, if you would mind sharing what the discussions earlier today between yourself and myself entailed.
Thank you. I guess to reduce any ambiguity in terms of who's in, who's not, we've referenced the ATO's definition of what is a small business. So a small business is defined as a business that has an aggregated turnover of less than 10 million per annum. Now we have supermarkets, takeaways, fast foods, etc. So to suggest someone's in or not based on a definition that we've developed, I think, I guess, could lead to, I guess, some debate, some disagreement. So we think by aligning it to the ATO's definition, it's very clear for everybody in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just another point of clarity, just because their fees are waived doesn't mean that they won't still continue to be inspected, obviously.
That's correct, and particularly in the current environment where we've got food vendors and so on, obviously hygiene and cleanliness is very important. Thank you.
Are there further questions?
Yes, Your Worship. Councillor Wilson here. So the officer recommendation, I guess, included that the grants for events would be waived, and Councillor Hamilton has added some words there, I guess, for clarity too, that would include major events such as the NAIDOC event and the Australia Day event. Just on that, is that staff's understanding also that the Australia Day event would have otherwise been excluded from the budget framing?
So just before our CEO answers, on page 47 of the report, about halfway down the page, the staff make reference to this issue. So it is included in the report, and the staff have said the town will be unable to operate significant events such as those mentioned, NAIDOC Day and Australia Day, these events have a long lead time in planning and preparing and rely on grant funding from external sources. So it has been addressed in the report, but maybe you would like to add to this, Ms. Max?
I think you've responded eloquently, Madam Mayor, but you're absolutely correct. These are events that draw thousands, and they do require almost 10 to 12 months in lead time in terms of preparation. So preparations for Australia Day would normally be underway right now. We would also be looking for grant funding to support it. At this stage, not knowing what the future looks like in forecasting next financial year, we also have a situation where we're going to have reduced income. We're going to have, issues that we need to manage around cash flow. We set aside around $500,000 for grant sponsorship and our major events. And we have other more pressing business to channel what limited funding we do have into in terms of core services. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, did you have any further questions?
No, Your Worship. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, we have Councillor Hamilton's amended motion before us, which includes the amendment proposed by Councillor Gangel in relation to completely waiving the Bassendean Oval licence fee. Councillor Hamilton has moved the motion and I has seconded the motion. Is there anybody against this motion?
Yes, I'm indicating that I'm against the motion for the purpose of facilitating debate.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hamilton, would you like to open debate?
Okay. So basically, I support the administration trying to get some parameters in place for the upcoming preparation of our budget. I understand the changing landscape of our environment at the moment that creates financial pressures. I think it's a good thing to actually try and project forward some actions. Obviously, councillors all have different ideas about where we're going, but we also require the administration to understand the direction that council might want to take in respect to alleviating some of the pressures on our community and our business community, our sporting clubs, etc. So I did put in some changes in that I did feel that because the environment is so it's such a changing environment at the moment, with all the state government and federal government rules and regulations coming in, some being relaxed, blah, blah, blah. I do believe that we should look at some short-term provisions, and we can always, as a council, extend some of these provisions. We can expand on them if we like. But I think this is a good start to what has been proposed previously. And as we go through the budget process, I believe that we will become more aware of any other measures that need to be put in place. So I would encourage councillors to support my amended motion, as it is a good starting point. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. I speak in favour of the motion with the amendments made by Councillor Gangel and Councillor Hamilton. I think it's a challenging time for many in our community, but it is also going to be a challenging time for local governments, with no support at this stage being offered by state or federal to local governments, either for retaining staff or for facilitating projects that we wish to progress in order to help stimulate our local economy. So the next budget cycle is going to be particularly challenging, and I think the proposals that the staff have put forward and fellow councillors are a step in the right direction to us being able to formulate a budget for the next year that continues to deliver what our community needs. Some of the fee waiving and so on, I think, is really important so that our community groups and businesses within the town are not put under too much financial pressure at this particular time. Some of the things that we are going to have to make decisions about as a council will be challenging decisions, and I think the definition of what are our central and our core business and what are the extras and nice to haves are going to be a really important part of that conversation. That's reflected somewhat in the last point of the motion that is before us about suspending grants and sponsorship programs and our major events, partially due to the effects of the coronavirus itself and the need to limit interactions between large groups of people, but also considering what other things that are absolutely essential to our community at this time. We really need to make sure that we can deliver on all of the core essential elements to our community, and in order to keep rates down and to minimise the impact on our community, it is going to require us to make some changes to what we may ordinarily fund, and things like events are one of those things which are extra nice to have that I think we can make some decisions about for the next financial year that will allow us to deliver minimal and potentially zero rate increases to our ratepayers, especially if the state government comes on board and changes their decision around the revaluation of rental values. So I'm happy to support this motion and give the staff some guidance as to the kind of budget that we would like to see prepared for our town for the coming year that provides the essential services but limits the financial impact on our ratepayers. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Worship. So I've got grave concerns about the state government deciding to push ahead with the change to the gross rental values this year. The state government called on local governments to pass on a 0% rate increase to communities, and notwithstanding the qualifications that Councillor Quinton raised, we did give instructions as a council unanimously to the CEO to draft a budget for our consideration based on a 0% rate increase. If the change to the gross rental values goes through, it becomes an impossible task for local government to be able to pass on a 0% rate increase, given the complex algebra that's in the formula for calculating rates on the basis of rental values. It will create massive problems, not only for our local government, but for local governments across the metropolitan area. And I sincerely hope that the state government reconsiders its decision and defers this for another year. I will join the Mayor in her suggestion to lobby our state representative, Dave Kelly, to that end, and also the Premier of Western Australia to that end as well. I understand the change that Councillor Gangel wanted to make, and note the mover and seconder accepted it, about providing an additional $17,000 benefit to the Swan Districts Football Club. It's fair and reasonable to do so in the sense that the fees are for the use of the ground, and it does not look at this stage like they will be using the ground for that purpose. There are some things that I don't know, however, about the Swan Districts Club. I don't know how many of their staff they've laid off. I don't know how their other revenues and expenditures are placed. So, you know, I know the CEO is a good and decent man and looks to do the right thing by his club and his community, but I hope that he's also looking after his staff if we're going to provide 100% waiver of the fee in the same way that our council's looked after our staff. On the Australia Day event, I've been a supporter of the continuation of the Australia Day event, and it's been an issue of some controversy over the years, but I think the comments made by the CEO about the long lead times and the ongoing uncertainty mean that this is a nice to have. It may well be in January next year that all of the restrictions are lifted and we're able to get 20,000 people together in a small confined space. And it might be technically possible for such an event to go ahead, but I think the prudent thing to do at this time is to factor in the possibility that that might not be possible, that there's the possibility there might be a second wave of infection, all sorts of other unforeseens that mean that it's necessary for us to pass on the Australia Day event and the NAIDOC event in the coming financial year. And for those reasons, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Are there any other speakers?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to briefly speak to the effect that this will have on our finances around our childcare centre, the unintended consequences of the federal government's early childhood education and care relief package, and what that will have to us in terms of our finances is quite extraordinary. I think that it is upon us now to communicate with our community and the ratepayers who might have to subsidise this service, which has never been subsidised ever before, because it has been completely self-sufficient in the entirety that it's run. The quality of the care has meant that that childcare centre is number 4 in the state. Number 4, that is not going to get compromised by this decision. But we need now to rally together and make sure that we get the funding that we have lost back. I do note that this goes to June, and every single dollar that we have lost should be earned back from the state or federal government because of this decision. The women, the men that work in that place, mostly women that work in that place, care for the children of this community, and they are absolute heroes in my eyes. So we need to do everything to make sure that that service is sustained and operational as a business, as it always has been, and the children under that care are continued to be cared for in perpetuity, and that business is not lost. It would be a massive shame to this community if this decision loses that business within this community. I just also wanted to make a note of the other things that haven't been mentioned in this discussion, and that is our priorities as going forward. We have had lengthy discussions about the projects that we see as a priority, and for me, some of the huge priorities that I want to make sure and that the community is aware of is the Sandy Beach Playground, the suicide prevention and mental health, which is now something that's called Neighbour Assist, which has been quite extraordinary. I'm getting the wind up from the Mayor. And a lot of the other projects that are a priority are still going ahead, and I would hope that we would communicate that, not just in an agenda item that's going to be recorded, but something that we can continue to talk to with our community.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. And just to clarify, when you were speaking just then about wind in the willows and you were referring to this decision, I think you were referring to the decision by the federal government in terms of the childcare package, as opposed to a decision which Town of Bassendean has made that is impacting the childcare facility. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for clarifying. This is a federal government decision that we are impacted by.
Thank you for that. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on this item?
Yes, Your Worship, I would like to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Ganjo.
Thank you, Worship. Look, just very quickly, just to thank the administration, the CEO and the officers involved in preparing this report. Certainly one of the most generous packages I've seen a local government put out. I'd like to thank the Mayor and also the Deputy Mayor for supporting the waiver, and hopefully other councils will also support the waiver for the Swan Districts Football Club. This is a very, very difficult time for all areas and no doubt sporting events and the arts as well, who currently don't have any direct participation in their fields. So I think we just need to look out for them and make sure we get one of our biggest draw cards, make sure they can get through the other side, because it's fantastic to have a waffle club in the town of Bassendean. Also reiterate, it's great that we're being able to support our community, and I appreciate there are difficult decisions and tough decisions that need to be made in relation to the budget. I'm happy to make them. I understand events aren't possible to go ahead, therefore reallocating the money to assist our community that are struggling at this present moment in time is a very, very good method indeed, and very much supported, and thank councillors and the administration for putting it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Gangel. Councillor William or Councillor Barty, would either of you like to speak?
I waive my right to debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barty.
And I also waive my right to debate.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, did you wish to speak again?
Yes, very quickly, just to add to comments by Councillor Quinton. I absolutely agree that to have our well-run, financially successful childcare pretty much undermined by decisions from other levels of government that financially disadvantage our local government. In fact, it comes back to being a cost to the ratepayers now, which, as has been stated, has never happened before. And so these types of decisions that have negative effects on local governments that go unrecognised by other levels of government, I think that it's really imperative that they realise that local government is carrying a very large load, and our budgeting for this year is going to be very, very difficult. So I do as well acknowledge the same as Councillor Gangel, the administration and their hard work in bringing forward many of these factors that outline to us the directions, our limitations, and the things that we need to do to address financial sustainability. So I am thankful that I work with such a great team of councillors, and thankful that the administration understand our need to move forward as quickly and as financially successfully as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton and councillors. So we'll put that to the vote. Can I get you to indicate if you intend to vote against this motion? Okay, in that case, it is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the staff for your efforts in preparing this report and the subsequent budget. So we'll move on now to item 12.13, which is the monthly financial report. So, as usual, if there's any questions to begin with. Okay, if there's no questions, is there a mover for the motion? Okay, I'll move the motion. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Wilson here, happy to second.
Thank you. Is there anybody against the motion? Okay, in that case it's carried, but just noting that both Councillor Quinton and Barty are not present, so it is carried 5-0. So moving on to 12.17 now. This is the quarterly report for the period ended at 30th March this year. Councillor Hamilton, I believe you had a question on this item.
Thank you. Yes, the resolutions are earmarked for deletion. There's one that I would like to remove, which is ROC 17/57444.
Councillor Hamilton, can I request that you write that number in the chat so that our minute clerk has access to that? And what is that particular resolution in relation to?
Okay, it relates to resolution on the 23rd of the 4th, 2019, relating to Tonkin Park Containment Cell. It was a resolution, it was a motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brown. My reasons for requesting that that be removed from the recommended for deletion is because I believe that there are aspects to that resolution that have not yet been fulfilled.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that the only the point you wanted to raise?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, would you like to move, if there are no further questions, would you like to move the officer recommendation with that amendment?
Yep. Sorry, I'm just trying to type while I'm talking to you at the same time.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Is there a seconder for the officer recommendation with that one resolution removed from the deleted items?
Councillor McWilliam, I'll second that.
Councillor McWilliam, was that you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So moved Councillor Hamilton, seconded Councillor McWilliam. Is there anybody against? Okay, so that is carried. Councillor Quinton is back. So I believe we have 6-0 with Councillor Barty still absent. So moving on to item 13, notices of motion which have previously been given. We have none because Councillor Hamilton's motion has been moved to item 14, which is announcements for the next meeting. So Councillor Hamilton, you mentioned earlier that you may have wanted to amend this or make some changes. Is that correct?
I do note a discussion that we had last week, Madam Mayor, and I would like to confirm your assertion that this matter will be brought to the next concept workshop on the 5th of May for discussion with councillors and administration. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And Ms. Mabs, I believe we'll have that on the agenda for next week's concept workshop.
Okay.
That's correct, Madam Mayor, and we'll provide detailed information in the bulletin this Friday so councillors can review it prior to the workshop.
Okay.
Many thanks.
So in that case, I'll withdraw that motion at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. We also have another announcement of notice of motion from Councillor Wilson. So for councillors' benefit, it is recorded in the meeting chat on to the side. Councillor Wilson, did you wish to read that out?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will also just note too that Councillor Barty returned at 7:10. So the notice of motion would read, Councillor requests staff prepare a report for Council as a part of the budget process detailing A, all of the service providers the town contracts for the provision of maintenance of road reserves in the town, including but not limited to weeding, street sweeping, tree pruning, tree planting, tree watering, footpath and crossover installation and maintenance and related activities. B, the expiry dates of these contracts and whether the contracts contain options to renew or extend. C, the annualised cost of each of the contracts across the forward estimates until their expiry. D, the scope of activity of the services provided in each of these contracts. And E, officer advice on any operational obstacles that would arise from bringing the scope of work for each of these contracts in-house following the expiry of the contracts.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Are there any further announcements of notice of motion? Okay, thank you. So we have no urgent business this evening, so we'll move on to our confidential business. So thank you for any community members who have been listening along. Can I please ask Aidan and Liz to cease the recording and the live streaming now, please? or actually councillors, can I have a mover to go behind closed doors, please?
Yes, Councillor Quinton.
Councillor Quinton moved, Councillor Wilson seconded, I believe.
Yes.
Is there anybody against? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Aidan, can you just confirm that the live stream has been
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. I'll be turning the live stream off. I just need to move from the committee room to the council chambers for that purpose, so I'll just be a few moments. Thank you.